Aruco for introducing themselves to us and giving us a little insight as to why Michigan. So we really appreciate that conversation and thank all of them for being a part of today. A couple more introductions. I want to introduce Elise Matz from Senator Peters' office. Elise, I think we know she's been a Michigan gal for quite a while, is in the Marquette office. We met with Elise and Senator Peters, I don't know, I think it was a couple months ago, sometime during the summer. It was really nice. He came and said, tell me about forestry, tell me about Northern Michigan. So a number of us in the room sat around and had a great discussion. So appreciate Elise and Senator Peters for that type of exposure and conversation. So Elise, very nice to have you. And I also want to introduce a couple of colleagues of mine in the Department of Natural Resources. I want to introduce the Wildlife Chief, Russ Mason, and the Assistant Chief, Doug Reeves. They're in the audience today. Real partners in Forest Resource Division. So everything we do has a wildlife habitat consequence, and it's our job to make sure that that consequence is actually an enhancement. So we work very close, got a great relationship with both of these gentlemen, and as a result, I think Michigan is a great place to grow wildlife, to grow recreation, and to grow habitat. So we appreciate them being a part of today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rich Bowman. And here's Rich. Rich is coming up from the Nature Conservancy, TAC member, general overall good guy, and he's going to lead you in the afternoon, so you're taking kind of a step up. I'm not sure he went and found the beer tent at the Navy game, but he can tell you all of that. I did notice, where's Kelly? I noticed in his presentation, did you see that bottle of Corona there? Kind of nice. So, appreciate it.
Thanks,
Rich,
Bill.
all yours.
Yeah, this beer thing is a theme, at least with Bill. As Bill said, I'm Rich Bowman. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Nature Conservancy. That means that I'm an expert at absolutely nothing, and so my job today is to introduce folks and to keep us on schedule. This one will be fun because they gave me a sign to be down in front to show the presenters that they have 5 minutes left. So guys, we're a little behind, so you get 5 minutes. There's your sign. Our first panel today is going to be talking about energy and biomass issues. We have 3 folks with us. 2 are good friends, and one is a new good friend of mine from our work. We'll start with J.R. Richardson, the chair of the Timber Advisory Committee, who's going to talk a little bit about the UP Energy Initiative. We'll then go to my fellow committee member, Gary Milo, who's been involved with the ICC Biomass Committee and is going to talk about their report out. And then we will finish up with Robert Johnson from the new energy agency, who will talk about some issues on energy policy for the state of Michigan as a whole. So, JR, you're up.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ken again, because I thought that was a very timely speech today, and it really plays into the whole idea of what we're trying to get across here, so I appreciate that. And as a Uber, I can't talk about the alcohol thing, because you know, you'll think he's joking and you'll think I'm telling the truth. So I'd like to do a little thing on you know, the UP Power and what's happened in the Upper Peninsula for power. And you know, I've been very involved, and I was the chairman of the Timber, or the ICC committee, and also the Timber Advisory Committee. And we spent a lot of time looking at, you know, the UP Power situation. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of it, other than saying that in the long run, there's a supply and a demand issue, and part of the supply issue was based on Presque Isle Power. You know, and you see the ads on television where, you know, the coal plants are going down under the new regs. And so it might not happen this year, next year, in 5 years, but within the next 10 years, either coal plants are going to have to hang a lot of regulatory emission removing devices on their stack, or figure out clean coal technology. Something's going to have to happen, or they're going down. So we're fortunate in the state of Michigan to have natural gas. You know, a lot of that natural gas can come to the UP, but there's going to have to be some things done with the natural gas line. Fortunate to have ATC, and I see Brett is here. And part of the, part of the solution will be, running power lines. Either, you hear anything from the Straits of Mackinac, they're bringing power in from Wisconsin. They're wading through all of that, and they're looking at that. And I'll go back. The Presque Isle plant's about 350 megawatts, so that's what they're looking at. The big deal there is what's going to happen when Presque Isle goes on. So that's basically the question. And, the mines have talked about, putting in a gas plant. So, but that doesn't, you have to build a gas line, okay? You have to build an ATC line. You have to, solar, you have to build lines from a solar plant. Wind, you have to build lines from a wind plant. So there's some logistic issues that, they're working through and they're going through and looking at all the different things. And one of the big things that I'm an advocate of, because I want to put Michigan people to work and Upper Peninsula people to work. And a big deal that we have, and I always like to explain, if you lived in North Dakota, you can use natural gas and make your power and heat your homes. If you live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, you sure as heck ought to utilize wood, because that's one of your renewable natural resources. And we've done a lot of studies to show that we have a lot of wood up there, and it's renewable, and it's sustainable, and it can be cut in a manner that's good for the habitat and good for the forest, and also good to make power out of. So if you take a good, strong look at that, at the end of the day, you come to the realization that if you make electricity out of gas, it's cheaper than making electricity out of biofuels. So I always like to call it the, I'll say with Valueadded and say, JR, how can you justify building a gas plant? And I say, well, in my mind, it's either you take a look at a bio plant. We run one in Lawrence, Michigan, 17.7 megawatts, and we probably have 80 people working there total. So if you had a 20 megawatt gas plant instead of the bio plant in Lawrence, you would have exactly 2 people working there. You could drive by with a garage door opener, start your plant up, and have at it. So we put 78 more Michigan people to work. So one of the, so I like to call it the net present value of a megawatt. And basically, what you're looking at is at the end of the day, you have taxpayers, you have people working in the woods, you have all the added benefits. So either you accept that as fact, which it is, and I've looked for a good economy. It's not an easy thing. I should be able to put a number on it. If you can make bio energy for $90 and you can make gas for $60, what's your net present value of both? And then maybe it comes out to, you can drop my price by $20. I don't know that answer, but I know one thing: I can put 78 people to work. And for a Uper, that's pretty good math and pretty fast for me. But I don't like to complicate things. I know that we're looking to put people to work. We put to work on it. And then the next thing that came up is, in my opinion, I don't care who owns the plants, okay? So at the end of the day, what we had decided that it doesn't come down to if an independent person owns a plant, like a Traxxas Power, which I happen to work for, or if it's a big utility or a small utility. It could be, DTE, Consumers, Wolverine, Upco, who cares who owns it? What we don't want to do is put people to work. So I don't want to, I don't want to fight with people. All I want to do is figure out a way that part of our portfolio is to have mixed fuels. You built a boiler in the 50s, what'd you do? You could burn wood in it, you could burn fuel oil in it, you could burn gas in it, you could burn coal in it, you could burn, if it wasn't moving, you could burn it, And why'd you do that? Because you take the cheapest fuel and you burn it and make power out of it. And I'm real afraid that we're gonna back ourselves into a corner, and all the power that we're gonna make is gonna be dependent on one fuel. That fuel price starts going up and you're all hung, and I don't think that's a good thing, especially in the Upper Peninsula where we have excess wood that's not being used for anything else, and it would fit perfectly in for what we were talking about today, like a particle plant and a cogeneration plant up there. So there's room for us, and there's room to make that happen. And one of the things we've been pushing with the legislators is a 1% base load in the UP or in Michigan. You don't want to split Michigan into 2 halves, and I've been told 100 times that there's a bridge and that Lower Peninsula is part of the UP and all that good stuff, and I'm getting it. I got it. But at the end of the day, a 1% base loaded renewable fuel portfolio would give you enough room to probably put 100 megawatts in the UP. And then you could do between ATC and the natural gas plants, you could have a nice mix of different power sources, and you could put a lot of people to work. So that's what we're looking at, and I think that people are starting to listen to us, and I think that it's a worthwhile use of a natural resource that we have up there. So I appreciate it, and thank you. Meaning not to put the sign up. I was watching.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Gary Mueller, Director of Michigan Biomass, a coalition of the state's utility-scaled wood-fired power plants. Energy in general, biomass specifically, was a large topic of conversation at the 2013 summit. And in the ensuing conversations over the next couple months, the Timber Advisory Council thought about maybe what we need to do is take a look at how do we optimize Michigan's biomass potential. And so in August of 2013, a work group was assembled to take a look at that. And then this past February, that work group assembled a document of recommendations on how Michigan may optimize that potential with a series of recommendations. I'm going to use that.
Welcome to my world.
Wrong button. Okay. Just a real quick overview of biomass in Michigan. There are 7 dedicated wood-to-electricity projects in the state that total about 180 megawatts of installed capacity. There are also other biomass energy users here. My apologies to Dennis Werblow. I left decorative panels off here. I know they have a biomass boiler. And pretty soon we may be adding Rocco to this list of bioenergy users. Filer City is actually a coal-fired power plant that uses a little bit of biomass in its mix. And of course we have 3 universities that have biomass capabilities, but for various reasons those systems are not operating today. If you're to open up Dr. Leifer's report and start digging into it, you'll see that fuel wood, there he is in the back, fuel wood is an important part of Michigan's forest resources in that marketplace. That includes firewood, pellets for residential heating, as well as wood chips for electricity generation. But when you look at the electricity side of the equation, we're really a small part of total generation, right around 1.5% per year. And then if you winnow that down and take a look at it from a renewable energy standpoint, in line with the renewable portfolio standards adopted in 2008, biomass has played a significant role in that initiative to diversify the state's energy resources and comply with pending clean energy laws. Also from Dr. Leifer's study, jobs. We provide more jobs than most other sources of renewable energy, close to 700 jobs statewide, about $60 million a year in economic output. Half of that is in labor costs, and the vast majority of those labor dollars are in the fuel procurement process. So these are the people that you know and work for you that procure, process, and transport that fuel. So what the Timber Advisory Council wanted to do was, biomass lives in 2 different worlds. There's the forest resource side and the energy market, energy policy side, and they are 2 completely different animals that don't work in sync at all. So how can we look at policies and practices and align those so that when there is feedstock available, there's an energy market to move that into? So first off, we need to optimize existing capacity. We have biomass energy facilities that are running now, facilities that are idle now. How can we optimize that potential? We need to look at where those biomass feedstocks reside. Under a previous administration, there was some studies done that said there's 32 million green tons of wood out there available for energy. Well, I always responded, the problem is it's in 32 million places. So how do we capture that, and rather than let it go to waste, we extract energy from it? Very important is, what barriers do we have in practices and policies, again, on the resource and the energy side, that prevent the capture of that resource for energy? How can biomass energy integrate with the forest products industry? And a lot of you folks know the role that we play in that. It's a little less known on the energy side. You know, how can we integrate with the utility models and large energy users such as industrial ratepayers in providing their energy needs? So again, looking at policies, programs, regulations, how do they align, and then, you know, once we get our arms around that, you know, what is the potential role for biomass within the state of Michigan, again, to optimize the energy that's available there? So the work group was organized under the Intergovernmental Collaborating Committee, which was a cross-departmental government reform practice that was put in place by Governor Snyder. We really had sort of two objectives. One, we really know that we need to reach out to various sectors across the state and help them understand what biomass is, how it works, and the benefits it brings to the table. So that starts with the forest products industry, reaches into the energy policy side, and the policymakers as well as consumers of energy. And then secondly, we wanted to take a look at what policy and regulation and other restrictions or impediments exist out there that we need to overcome, again, to optimize biomass energy potential. So the group was assembled. We had representatives from just about every department in the state, as well as the biomass energy industry, with those individuals identified here in green. It was administered under the Department of Natural Resources. Bill was kind of our guiding force in that, and Kim Korbecki somewhere handled a lot of the legwork on that and really made the process work well. So we took a look at what we were trying to accomplish and, you know, how are we going to present this information. So we went with the format that the governor rolled out in 2012 in his special message on energy. And that was, you know, the need to build a no-regrets energy future for Michigan based on the 4 pillars of adaptability, reliability, affordability, and protecting the environment. So the first preamble of our document, I guess you could call it, we, you know, sort of pigeonholed biomass into that. It reduces waste on 2 fronts. Energy waste, because we're distributed generation, you don't have to transmit that much power and lose the voltage associated with that transmission. And it's beneficial use of a byproduct. So we reduce material waste by extracting the energy value of it before it's then disposed of. And it's also, it diversifies our energy portfolio. You know, as JR said, we don't want the state to go down the road of all of its eggs in a single basket, like natural gas, like coal, and the consequences that may come with that. So, you know, it's not just natural gas, coal, wind, and solar. Biomass can contribute to that diversity as well. On the reliability side, again, we're distributed generators, so we support the grid, you know, particularly through voltage stabilization, and we reduce the impacts of transmission outages when they occur. I like to say that biomass is homegrown, Michigan-made domestic energy. It's not subject to the upheavals of national or international economics or geopolitical issues. It's very stable in pricing, and as such, it can provide some hedge against volatile commodity prices in like petroleum and natural gas. On the affordability side, jobs, local spending, local tax base. These facilities are very important to the communities they serve, very important to the forest products industries in those communities by helping them manage their waste and byproducts. Again, a lot of these facilities operate under fixed price long-term contracts, so it's very predictable and very stable over a period of time. And on the project development side, most biomass is developed by independent power producers. And in that scenario, those development costs and risk are borne by the investors and the financiers. Where on the utility model, it's a little bit different, and those costs are borne directly by the ratepayer. On the environmental side, we do not have the air emissions profile of coal. The EPA has determined that biomass, as it's done in Michigan and throughout the country, is mostly carbon neutral. So we will contribute to the state implementation plan to comply with the Clean Power Plan. We've talked a lot about you know, our role in forest health and stewardship. We remove material that could lead to fire risk, inhibit regeneration. You know, we assist with sanitation and fighting disease and infestation. So we essentially came up with 4 recommendations. One is, we need a more competitive environment for biomass. Again, for independent power producers, we think utilities need to have opportunities in there as well, and also self-generators. Those industries that want to use their byproducts to produce their own internal energy needs. We need to take a look at all the various rules and statutes and the things that impact those independent power producers and those self-generators. As JR mentioned, biomass brings a lot of value added. It's not just about the electrons to light your home or charge your iPhone. It's about the jobs, economics, habitat management, forest health and stewardship, grid support. It's all of those things that we think allows biomass to compete with other energy sources. And then finally, we really need to take a look at, where are there opportunities for biomass feedstock? How much of it is there on a sustainable basis, and where is it? What type of energy project can it support? So under the first recommendation, we've suggested that the state, look at incentives. We didn't specify any incentives, but we believe that those can help jumpstart and seat an industry in the marketplace. And we believe that, again, we need to take a look at rules, regulations, and policies that seem to present obstacles to non-utility generators. Again, the self-generator and the independent power producer. Current biomass facilities have older contracts that don't necessarily fit into the new context of the renewable portfolio standards. We think that some of those changes could sort of spread some of that opportunity amongst the various sectors. Specifically, rules and things that need to be looked at. One is, how standby rates are calculated. If I'm an industrial customer, I have my own energy generation source. I still need access to the grid because at some point in time I may have to take my system down for maintenance and I need to buy system power. There's also interconnection costs. I need to hook my system up to the grid so that I can get that power. If I have excess load I need to balance, I can put it on the grid. And we would like regulators to take a look at how those rates and costs are calculated and implemented so that we can ensure that they're fair and equitable for all the parties involved. And again, I won't belabor this, but we really need to quantify the value added of biomass. How do all of these added benefits make it competitive with other energy sources in the new and emerging energy marketplace? And again, we need to continue our education and outreach activities, particularly on financial markets who don't quite always understand how biomass works. And you don't have a fuel contract, you need to have a fuel contract. That's security. But our industry works a little differently in that regard. And then on the resource side, we want to ensure that in the governor's recycling initiative that energy extraction is viewed as an acceptable form of recycling. Even though we're not making another product, a tangible product, we are creating an energy product that is highly valued. Again, to look for those opportunities. We, as an industry, we're very much supportive of trying to expand the marketplace for Michigan's wood fiber resources, because for every piece of board and lumber you make, there's a residual that we can convert into energy. So where are we today with everything that's happening in energy policy in Michigan? We're moving away from certain regulatory structures into what's typically referred to as an integrated resource plan. The framework of that is being developed through the legislature and through the Michigan Agency on Energy. Nothing is finalized yet, but we believe that it will provide some opportunities for biomass to compete with other generation sources, as long as all of these values are recognized in that decision-making process. Specifically, there are some pressing issues at this point in time. We have a number of facilities that their power purchase agreements with utilities are set to expire, one as soon as the end of this year. So we've engaged the Public Service Commission and the legislature to address some of these things. Good news is that there has been a bill introduced to address some of these contract issues that are pressing now. And yesterday, the Public Service Commission adopted its own order to take a look at these contract constructs to see, how they're going to fit into Michigan's energy future and this new energy paradigm. So again, our two worlds of resource policy, resource availability, and energy markets and energy policy, trying to get those aligned so that we can take advantage of these resources. Again, energy policy needs to acknowledge the value of biomass's intrinsic values like economics, clean energy, and we need some sort of competitive environment where those attributes can float to the top and make it competitive with other energy sources. So, thank you.
Well, I'm Robert Jackson, I'm the director of the Michigan Energy Office, and I want to say that JR and Gary, they did a really good job at covering my speech. So I'm just going to hit the high level things that I wanted to talk about, things that they didn't address. The first I wanted to say is that, I think most of you guys know about the Michigan Agency for Energy. It's a new agency. We were put in place really to implement the new energy policies of the state, coming out of the governor's office and coming out of the legislature. And I think we're all familiar with the governor's initiatives of ensuring that we have affordable, sustainable, and reliable power in the state. And I think we're familiar with, in order to get there, we need to do energy efficiency, we need renewables, and we need investment in infrastructure. And I think that's where the cornerstone is really the investment in the infrastructure. And I think we all know that there are legislation that is coming out of both the Senate and the House. We know that within Senator Knott's committee, you have the Senate Bill 437, which looks to amend provisions of the Public Act 3 that deals with electric choice, integration, and others in integrated resource planning. And Senate Bill 282, which is Senator Casperson's UP transmission bill. And then there is a number of House bill packages that are coming out under Representative Nisbet that will also deal with choice with transmission, RPS, and a number of issues that will deal with creating a new energy policy for the state. Now, as part of this creation of this new energy policy that we know is going to come, we know that the House will probably vote on something this year, and the expectation is that there will be a policy that will come out of the legislature by the end of the calendar year. And what we've done within the Agency for Energy is that we're working with the Michigan Public Service Commission, with the Department of Environmental Quality, to come up with a roadmap to implement this new energy policy. And we began having our discussions in September to look at, how do we do this? How do we implement this roadmap? So we put together a steering committee, as I said, chaired by the Michigan Agency for Energy, and participations from the Department of Environmental Quality, MPSC, and from the Attorney General's office. And we formed what's called a Stakeholder Group, and we have a number of folks that are involved within this Stakeholder Group that's chaired by the AG to look at formulating a roadmap to help us implement the policies that are coming forth. We had hoped to be further along, but the legislative process is long and arduous, but we do see some light at the end of it, and that committee and work group will look at implementing the policies. And the committee will also perform some advisory work to the commission in regard to rate design and utilities of the future. Along with the energy policy implementation work that we're doing, we're also in the process of forming a committee to look at energy markets and assurances. We hope to be able to develop a roadmap where Michigan will work with its partners to develop an energy policy framework that allows for successful implementation. energy policy where it's going to look at and analyze key energy sectors. It'll roadmap, it'll lead it, we'll lead a road mapping session to establish a baseline analysis of market design. It will identify barriers to change and develop an implementation plan, and it will develop documentations that not only that we will use internally within the state, but we hope to be able to share that with other states in the region that are looking at doing work within the energy markets. To that, we're also starting in January, we're partnering with the states of Georgia, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee on what we call the Energy Efficiency Registry. And the purpose of the registry is to look at trying to monitorize the savings from energy efficiency so that it will be a common understanding of what is the energy efficiency resulting from various practices that we hope that will incentivize investors to invest in energy efficiency more readily than what they currently do now. And so that will happen sometime at the beginning of the year. To that, we're also, we are running a clean energy manufacturing roadmap, which is looking at the various clean energy manufacturing technologies that are out there, looking at supply chains, looking at how it affects the economy, we're looking at the markets, we're looking at jobs, we're looking at that not only just within technologies within the lower part of the state, but we're also looking at that in technologies up in the Upper Peninsula. And then we're starting to move into developing a combined heat and power roadmap for how could we implement CHP more effectively within the state, looking at the various opportunities that will present itself to us, as well as the supply chain involved and how does that will affect the workforce and the resources that would aid to increase the amount of CHP. Now, all the data that we hope to gather from there would go into the work that we're currently starting on, the developing the state carbon implementation plan. There has been some pre-work in addition to the road mapping that we've done, and that pre-work has pretty much involved a work group that's being funded and organized through the National Governors Association, where we're looking at what are some of the the baseline loads and some of the data that we would need to feed into modeling software in order for us to develop a state carbon implementation plan. So we're almost at the end of it. We've done some runs. We have a general understanding of the direction that we go in, but no decision has been made whether or not we're going to do mass-based or rate-based in our final plan. As we move forward, we are beginning to, we're in those discussions on that plan is really going to germinate through the Department of Environmental Quality. We're just there to help with that facilitation of the planning process. And part of this work to develop the plan will involve putting together a stakeholder group where the stakeholders will meet and the stakeholders will have input in what the final plan looks like, or advise us as to the direction that the plan should go in. The process has not yet been finalized in regard to what would be the structure of the committee. They're working on it. The idea is that it could resemble the structure of the committees that we formed back in 2012, where the governor put together his initial energy plan, where he had the 5 documents on energy efficiency, renewables. And so a lot of that is still under development, but we are looking to move forward on it. But a lot is unknown. I mean, we really don't know in what direction we're going to go in. The data isn't there yet, but we hope to have some data very soon, hopefully by the end of the year or in January, so that we can move forward, because the draft plan is due in September of 2016. Now, on the other side of that, we have this effort to put together a state carbon implementation plan But then there's this whole question, what do you do with those communities that are impacted by the closure of a power plant? And so we're beginning to have efforts, and we're having conversations with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Treasury, MDAR, and others in MISHDA on how do we work with these communities to help these communities cope with the loss of a power plant. We, from some of the analysis that we've seen, there could be anywhere between a 10 to 40% loss in the tax base. When that happens, we know that there's going to be some economic hardship. It's going to affect going to affect not only the workers at those plants, but it'll also affect the community at large. So there's this effort now trying to put together some resources to try to address that issue, and we'll be meeting on that soon. Then there's the community. There's the UP energy issues. A lot of that has been addressed here. There's not much that I can say other than the fact that in my discussions with Valerie, she's very sensitive to the needs of the UP in terms of the base load that's there. We know that the UP is a very unique situation where most of the base load, there are facilities that are located to the larger loads, but then the smaller loads there, that the transmission issue that has to be addressed, as well as the cost issue. And I'm assuming that most of you guys know that I think it was Monday that the Marquette power, the city of Marquette, for their power plant, they have made a sizable investment, or will be making a sizable investment in converting their 3 generators to natural gas. So that in a nutshell is what we're doing within the Agency for Energy. And I'll be around for conversations. I think I got it back on schedule.
We're getting close. Thank you, All of our panelists are going to be here for the rest of the afternoon, so we have a question and answer session at the end of the day today, and I'm going to ask you to defer your questions till then, and we will catch them if you have any, in order to get ourselves caught up. So I'd like to invite Dr. Hallward and Mr. Ross to start making their way up, and while they do, if all of you would join me in thanking our energy panel one more time. When we were putting together the agenda for this meeting, I don't have any good beer stories like Bill does, but in the last year and a half, just about everyone in my office has been subject to one of my diatribes on the next 2 topics, because they frankly are the things that I'm most interested in. I think we have huge opportunities to grow our timber sector in a way that's both good for our economy and good for our environment, and I think cross-laminated timber is just really cool. And so our first presenter is Dr. Greg Hallward. He's going to be talking to us today about the market research that we've been working on with his firm on the competitive advantage of Michigan forest products sector. And so without further ado, Dr. Hallward.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Maybe just by way of introduction, it is the Hallward Institute. It's my institute. I got to name it, so a little bit of hubris there. Actually, it's an outgrowth of Implan, and I think probably from Larry's talk and everybody else's talk, Implan's been around for a long time. And so I also work with Implan. We created the institute here just a year ago to take advantage of historical data. Not only does Implan have information about the current economy, but we've built up nearly 15 or 20 years of historical data. And I wanted to take advantage of that in a research context, so we created a nonprofit research organization. And this study was the first study by the Institute, so that's pretty cool. I also do want to touch on the fact that I have obviously Michigan roots. I grew up in Hudsonville between Grand Rapids and Holland, very close to Howard Miller over there and things like that. Went to Grand Valley State for my master's or undergraduate degree, and then on to forestry graduate program. And I worked for the Forest Service for 30 years, and that's where implant came from. We developed implant at the Forest Service, and then in the 1990s it was privatized to a company. That company, I joined that company after I retired from the Forest Service, and our offices were in Stillwater, Minnesota, just outside the Twin Cities. And then we moved across the river over to Hudson, Wisconsin, so we moved over there. And then 2 years ago, we moved the company down just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. In that move down to Charlotte, some of our finance partners, interestingly enough, are furniture companies. They're in Hickory, North Carolina. So I do have some connections back to the furniture business and things like that, but forestry and natural resources have been a long-term aspect of my work. So what we were doing is, obviously you had this a previous workshop. We've seen this before. Out of that workshop came a request to do a study on supply chain practices and identifying new markets and things like that. That's what this study was about. What I'm going to show you today are some very high-level highlights of that. There's a report and some extensive data models, which are interactive data models that unfortunately I can't really play with in the short period of time here, but will certainly be available, I'm sure. So how did we approach this? Well, actually, we used 3 different models. This is mostly the work of Dr. Steve Cook at the Institute. Steve is a retired professor of ag economics from the University of Idaho, and he developed this because he did a lot of work over his career in economic development, local economic development. But I think what we've done is taken and extended the traditional use of in-plan models and in-plan accounts into some interesting new areas. The first model is a static analysis about economic structure. Gross and base are some terms that we use. Gross is the part of the economy that you can observe if you look at national income and product accounts, the standard amount of employment, amount of gross sales and things like that. The base structure is something that can't be observed directly. It is indirectly estimated through the use of like input-output models that are basically models of all the supply chains of all the businesses that are in an economy and how all those supply chains interact. So it's those interactions that we model and try and build a systematic model of. And that describes the structure of economies, the structure of all the different markets of various businesses transacting between themselves in the course of producing products from raw materials to end products. Okay. So the first model that we devise is this model that describes the structure of the economy, the structure of the Michigan economy, and in particular the structure of the forest products industries within the state of Michigan. The reason that we do this, we give it a little bit different look, is because when we talk about economic development, we're primarily talking about things like import substitution tools or export expansion tools for economic development and productivity and efficiency, and those derive from this descriptive model. The second one is looking at competitive advantage. How is the performance of businesses and how they integrate within the Michigan economy compare either over time or over place with neighbors, the rest of the country, different comparable sectors in other parts of the country and things like that over time. The third one is a new model that we've never really used before, and it's called structural path analysis. And this is where we look quite literally, just like Aramco does in the talk at lunchtime, about their particular supply chains and how they integrate with their suppliers, but looking at the structure of all the supply chains in the economy itself. And in particular, the path that raw materials, wood, takes through the production process into all the many uses that it gets used, with a particular view towards the efficiency and the capacity of those paths as they go through the system. Are there bottlenecks? Are there places where you're vulnerable to constraints? So looking at the structure of the forest products economy, first of all, what would we like to see? We'd like to see low wage, low value added import substitution sectors providing imports to high wage, high value added exporting sectors. And that's what we'd like to see in an economy. Because as you deepen and broaden the economy, you have more internal markets, more economic activity, more opportunities for jobs, and things like that. That's what we like to see. What we observed in the Michigan forest product economy is that most businesses, most firms play a dual role between money bringing or export enhancing forest product sectors. In particular, there's a bias towards that for office wood and furniture, pulp and paper, and showcase partitions and things like that. These are businesses that bring money in from outside the Michigan economy. But there are also important roles to be played by various businesses within the forest products sector, like sawmills, wood container pallet, veneer, and plywood, which play a role called money keeping. That is, they are supportive of the frontline businesses that play to the export markets. Okay? So I think what we'd like to say is that Michigan is turning raw material forest products into value-added finished products and then exporting those. That's the kind of economy that we particularly like to see. This is kind of a stylized diagram of the way we think of a structure of economy. Starting at the left side, you have, well, even off the chart at the left would be stumpage, but then logging sector feeding logs and raw materials into businesses like sawmills and pulp mills and veneer mills, and et cetera, that first column. As we move to the right, we get more and more secondary and tertiary product manufacturing, but at any one of those stages, of course, things can be exported outside the area, either outside the state of Michigan or to other countries. What we would like to see, obviously serving export markets, is how you get energy into the economy, how you get money into the economy. But you want to also try and keep as much activity within the economy. So what your natural tendency is we want to grow the economy to the right and to make it deeper. So we're going to extend it, extend the chain, extend the value chain to the right, and also increase the number of activities in the depth. And we call, obviously, to support the export expansion, finding new markets, like we heard this morning, and finding external foreign markets for our products. That's an export expansion path towards economic development. That's very good. That brings in money into the economy. What we don't want to do is start exporting to the left. Okay? We don't want to export logs, because if we export logs, we don't have the opportunity to process those into more value-added, higher wage type jobs and processing. So the strategy about keeping And deepening the economy is what we refer to as import substitution. That is, recruit or retain or expand businesses that support and extend the value chain to the left and deeper. And the discussion at lunch is a good example of import substitution to process wood fiber that may have been exported in a raw material fashion, in producing particle board, and it also provides the opportunity to feed into furniture manufacturing and things like that to continue this change. So this is the playing field. This is the playing field for the structure of the economy that you would want to exploit. These are the 10 most important things. Let's move to the second model that we had, and this is a competitive advantage. What we'd like to see in terms of competitive advantage is that we would want to focus in on producing things that we're good at producing, export that, and then use the money to import the things that we're not good at. It's a pretty simple model. That's what we would like to do. What we observe here is that, interestingly enough, wood office furniture manufacturing stands out for its performance over time and place over the last 10 years in both export and import substitution. It's rather remarkable, the role that office furniture is playing in terms of manufacturing, in terms of competitive advantage. Michigan office furniture stands out in comparison to, as we did, to any other state in the country. Paper and paperboard containers show positive, though modest, improvements in competitive advantage for import substitution, but they fall into a quadrant for export expansion because we put this into a SWOT format: strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. I'll show you in just a second. Commercial logging shows a modest strength in terms of import and export substitution, but it does play a key role in a structural path, and I'll return to that in a second here. I said that we put this into a SWOT format, so if we look at competitive advantage and compare the performance of the various forest sectors over time and in comparison to other states, and look at the performance of those things in this four-quadrant manner, we can see how each industry compares compared to performance in other states and in other in whole by each sector. This first one shows the performance. Again, this is a static picture of a very dynamic data model here. But you can see that forest products are in the upper, or forest office furniture is in the upper right quadrant. This is the strength category, meaning that it is performing growing at a faster rate and also growing larger in comparison to its contemporaries in other states, in all other states, dramatically more than even the other forest products. And that's why in the previous slide I talked about the other forest product sectors as being down in the threat category. They're below, so they're growing at a slower rate, even though they are growing somewhat larger in a place quadrant. If we look at the economic base analysis, this is the indirect money keeping activity. The performance of the office furniture sector is even more dramatic. Right? I just want to share this slide. This is the slide about about the wage structure. And you can see that the import substituting industries like the logging and sawmills have very low wages, at least when we rank them. So again, what we're trying to do is stretch out the value chain and deepen it and keep the primary processing industries, keep them functional to support the higher value-added businesses in the state. And the reason that we want to deepen and broaden the economy is that we want to pursue two types. There's two types of equilibrium economies that we can look at. One is a high-skill equilibrium economy where firms produce high-quality, specialized services with a well-qualified workforce. That's what we really like to do. But we have to avoid falling in the trap of a low-skill equilibrium economy that produces undifferentiated commodities and exports those, which require only a few high-skilled jobs and have a labor force with below-average education, things like that. So extending and expanding the economy is a way to avoid the low-skill equilibrium trap. I might just make a note that this is just one view of a very extensive data model that we included in the analysis, which is to link the in-plant accounts for the production accounts, link that to the occupations required in each of the industries in order to process their products, and then linking the occupations to the skills, knowledges, and abilities that are required to perform those jobs in there. So if we can, what we can do now is to do a lot of cross-correlations between specific types of knowledges and abilities that ought to be provided by educational systems and things like that in order to perform the jobs in the various industries. So when we're recruiting import substitution economies, we can quickly match not only the skills and abilities of the current workforce, but also to look at what to ask our educational systems to produce. The final model was the structural path, and what we'd like to see is a resilient, efficient network of interdependent marketing channels in the forest product. And while there will be, quote, bottleneck sectors in the supply chain, what we want to do is make sure that those bottleneck sectors are efficient and have a high capacity to feed through. What we observe within the forest products system, economy, marketing chains, that there are some sectors that interact more with others. In particular, labor and proprietary capital are some of the two, and the sectors are logging and sawmills. Obviously, if you're going to harvest stumpage and bring it to any kind of industrial process, you have to log it, you have to harvest it, and you have to get it to the mills. So it's pretty obvious where the bottleneck sectors, what the candidates are. But what we're measuring here is something called betweenness centrality. That is, within a network like this, where are the potential bottlenecks? And that would be the point R there serves a role which is a bottleneck, and you have to make sure that if things have to flow through the network, you have to have that node operating very efficiently and have the capacity, if you're going to extend the rest of the system out to the left or out to the right, you have to make sure that R has the capacity to feed that further system. This is a very busy diagram, but consider yourself very fortunate because I replaced Steve's 4 equations slide with this diagram. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. What we did was we measured between this centrality for each of the forest product sectors in the forest product supply chain network with structural path analysis. And then we've just arrayed them clockwise around the outside to say which ones have the highest degree of between that centrality, which ones are critical nodes, and then as the index of criticality as you go around clockwise. At the top there are things like labor, obviously the logging sector, capital is there, proprietary capital in particular, and sawmills, and then as we go around the clock there, the other sectors are there. I think it's important to note that the sawmill, the logging sector is there, and it's interesting that proprietary capital is there. I think that's indicative, proprietary meaning versus corporate capital, because I think that in the logging sector we have a lot of sole proprietorship, self-employed persons, small businesses that are providing the logging services, and access to capital for mechanization and automation is critical, and one has to wonder about if we want to have a high capacity, efficient logging sector, do they have the adequate access to capital because of the type, firm type, being self-employed or partnerships or small firms? Do they have the adequate access to capital to become more efficient and reduce the possible constraints, bottleneck constraints? So in summary, I think the strategy that we've identified here by looking at the structure, the comparative analysis, and the criticality of the networks, I think we can say three general things. One is obviously to deepen the supply chain so that low wage, low value added import substitution can be linked through a value chain to high value exporting sectors. One way to do that is to focus in on, say, furniture manufacturing, support export expansion for furniture manufacturing, but get furniture manufacturing to use more Michigan wood products, local wood products. Okay? And you can do that by trying to differentiate, perhaps have them marketing, differentiating the furniture, say it comes from sustainable sources, it's locally produced good, it's high quality hardwoods, that kind of thing. But I think the thing here is that it is to the benefit of the forest products industry to make alliances to businesses that are down the value chain to try and promote the use of local wood, local Michigan wood products, even though I'm sure that if you go down to the furniture manufacturing, yes, we use wood, but it's wood and we'll get wood, that meets our engineering quality standards and things like that. But I think there's an opportunity to promote the local aspects, the sustainable aspects, the green aspects, and promote use, expand the use in that sense. And then also to increase the capacity of bottleneck sectors, particularly logging and sawmill, to feed deeper into the supply chain. And probably, as I said, there's two opportunities there. One is training to increase skills, if we can get access, and to get access to capital. If we can get access to capital, increase the mechanization, increase the abilities, that's going to require higher skilled jobs. So it's an opportunity to create both better jobs and more jobs. I think that's a nice combination there. So an integrated strategy would identify these obstacles, and I think there's the potential, as Steve puts it here, that you can look very closely at meeting the $20 billion target that we had for output by having an integrated strategy to both deepen and expand the economy. So, yep, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, we're gonna move to Bob now.
Yeah, you
Okay. There's the clicker.
Okay, let's get it going. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I'm a Michigan kid to start with, so every time I get a chance to come home, I really enjoy it. I was born and raised in Midland. I graduated Midland High School, class of 1974. Went to Michigan Tech. My mom was a graduate of the University of Michigan in 1945. So we had 2 groups in the state. A little about myself. I currently, and for the past 27 years, I've worked for the Forest Service at the Forest Products Laboratory. We heard talks today from Kathleen about the National Forest System, and I'm sure a lot of people know about the National Forest System, but I don't think many people know that the U.S. Forest Service has the largest R&D program dedicated to natural resources in the world. We got about 500 scientists scattered from Maine to Hawaii and Alaska to Puerto Rico, covering everything from invasive species issues to harvesting issues, silviculture issues, and utilization issues. I work on the utilization side of it. I'm stationed at the Forest Products Laboratory. The Forest Products Laboratory is the nation's center for wood research. We've been in existence since 1910, and virtually everything you see out there today, from engineered products, all the dry kiln work, all that originally came out of the Forest Products Laboratory. So it's something really to be proud of. I've enjoyed working there. I've been there 27 years. I'm an engineer with them, which is kind of a strange thing. But anyway, what I want to talk to you today about, Dave asked me to talk about cross-laminated timber, as well as some other value-added engineered products. As a preceding speaker talked about broadening out and making our resource base here just a little bit deeper from the manufacturing side. So let's make sure I get all this. I'm going to start with this slide. That's kind of an interesting slide, and I'm going to go through some of the things on there. Virtually everything on there is a wood product, and most of those wood products on there are made from Michigan woods. And that includes the drones, and that includes the high-tech racing boats. I'm going to cover that a little bit, as well as construction materials and some highly engineered materials you see there over on the bottom right-hand side. Any one of those products, all those products can be made from Michigan woods or any wood. We just need the science and technology to do the job. It's an outstanding resource. If anything I want you to come away with today is a different view of wood, I want you to think about wood as an engineering material. And from an engineering standpoint, that means how can we use it for the best, highest value-added product that creates jobs for people, and it also is a great thing to do for our environment. Cross-laminated timber, from what I can tell, this is the first cross-laminated timber structure that's built in the United States. It's at a church down in North Carolina. I don't know much more than that. It's only about 2 or 3 stories high. Now we're talking about going to 9 stories high on it. What's cross-laminated timber? This is a structure going in Madison, Wisconsin, made out of cross-laminated timber. Those panels up at the top, do I get this right? Right here, that's a cross-laminated timber panel. The way to think of it is plywood on steroids, okay? So instead of thin layers cross-laminated together, we take 2x material and cross-laminate it together. That's what that product is. The neat part of that product is it's very stable. It's got some very good engineering properties. We can mix and match the materials we put in there. We can put higher value material on the external laminations, lower quality material on the internal laminations, and still get a very useful product. I think the real benefit of it, though, is look at all the supporting structural elements there. That's all glued laminated timber. Once they go to a CLT kind of product, they want to make the rest of the structure wooden too. So it opens up the door to a whole realm of things. The other thing I think it does that's so important to us today, we talk about the non-residential construction market is a lot more stable than residential construction. One of the gentlemen, I think Bill asked the question of all these outputs because just the housing starts have turned around. Non-res construction is a pretty stable market. Not perfectly stable, but it's more stable than the residential market. So the more we can get into that, the more stable we're going to have for a whole range of products. And I think that's what CLT does for us. Just some more pictures of this is at the Promega building in Madison. Beautiful timber structure with cross-laminated timbers up at the top. Beautiful, just great thing to do. It's a great product. It's still a new product. And in fact, it's so new that we're having a conference next week to define research needs so that we can actually implement more mass timber or cross-laminated timber in the United States. That workshop was funded by Woodworks and the American Wood Council. It's at the USDA Forest Service Forest Products Laboratory. When I get out of here, I'm going right back and set that thing up. But it's next week. Our whole purpose of that meeting is to review where we are on research worldwide and to identify our priority research needs so that we can implement that material and get it in there safely. There's a lot of effort to get into multi 10, 12, 14-story material, but there's some issues that you got to deal with on that. One of the issues we're going to talk about next week is, without getting into all the gory details, resistance to lateral loads. People want to put these in high seismic areas, like on the coast, Japan. Seismic becomes a real problem. You know, earthquakes become a real problem. So we got to address that in the design of these things and address that through the research. Second thing we're looking at next week will be building performance. What's its long-term durability? How do we fasten those things together? You look around this building, the biggest problem in any of these buildings is how you fasten it together. Well, it's got wonderful characteristics, but nails are not going to do it. Nails are not going to do it for those big structures. What's the sound absorption characteristics of it when we put these wall systems in? We don't want the neighbors hearing what's going on in the next room. The vibration characteristics of it. What's it going to be looking like in a load from an earthquake? That's a very important thing because these are going in Seattle. We've got some going in New York City. We've got some going in Portland. So we've got some real issues that we're going to deal with. Life cycle analysis. Finally, one of the biggest parts of these, when you get into multi-story structures, is fire performance. I think one of the beautiful things of this fire safety is it's forcing us back to talk about what we call mass timber or heavy timber construction. Most people in this room don't realize it, but actually heavy timber performs much better than steel and concrete in a fire. There's a classic picture, I don't have it with me, that has a laminated timber beam, and across it was in a fire, and across it are two steel eye joists that just melted. The wood performed extremely well. So we're getting back to that because of the work on CLT. Some of the research that's been going on, this is a multi-story building that we're cooperating with the folks in Japan, actually vibrating that and putting it into we can actually track, let's see how we stored the motion characteristics of various earthquake events around the world. We can pump that into there and we can actually simulate those and see what's going on a multi-story building like that. Here's what it looks like when we're building them. As you can see, they're wall panels all connected together. Just a very, very neat, unique product. What you can see in it though, one of the issues we're trying to address and we're going to have to address is how you fasten all these things together. That is a real issue. And that's going to be a real issue we're going to have to address. Now there's some opportunities there for some research and development, and there's some opportunities there to mix and match materials. I can tell you if we put a layer of fiberglass in between a couple of those layers and we put that in there where the fasteners on, I can make it behave just like a piece of steel. Cost goes up, but it really has some neat performance characteristics. Maybe we mix and match it with some Kevlar, some of these other engineering materials. So some really interesting work going on there. We're working cooperatively with the folks around the world on it. This is a study we're doing that's funded by the National Science Foundation. And as I said before, I don't want to get into all the gory details here. This thing is very heavily instrumented because we want to see what happens at the fasteners when it rocks, when it moves. The wood itself is very, very resilient. It's very ductile. Does a great job in response to an earthquake. Fasteners, not so much. So we got to work on that, and that's what we're working on in some of these. The other things we're working on is in the CLT area, Can we mix and match materials? Can we take low-value hardwood materials and mix them with softwood materials? There's not a problem, but we need that baseline information before those designers are going to implement. Which brings up the last thing on CLT. Everything we do at the Forest Products Lab in the Forest Service R&D program ends up going up into building codes. And it goes into documents like this that serve as a foundation for the international building codes that then trickle down and that every architect and engineer uses when they design these buildings. So all our work is geared toward getting in and finding answers or weaknesses in those building code things so that we can get more wood in there. This is the first book we put out on the CLT. It's the U.S. edition of cross-laminated timber. We're going to update that when we get the new data on the seismic stuff, different materials. Most right now is software, so we're going to upgrade that. But I want to point that out because what's important is not just to build these new products and build all these cool things, but we got to get them into the format where the architects and engineers will design with it comfortably and will require it. When they require it, it'll go. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple of these other engineered products just to give you an idea. They asked me some. I'm going to focus a little bit here on these and these. To give you an idea, not as sexy, not as glitzy as CLT is, but I want to tell you, there's a real growth in the engineered wood products industry in the United States and North America. It's probably the fastest growing segment. Just to give you some production statistics I got from the APA, the Engineered Wood Association in 2014, glulam, about 250 million board feet of glulam was produced in North America. Most of that is in the U.S., probably about 95%. Most of that's going into non-residential construction, so it's pretty stable. Laminated veneer lumber, you've all seen it, seen the microline products out there, all that kind of product. That's made from lower value, mostly softwoods now, but mostly lower value material. High value engineered product, you've all seen it, it's this kind of product right there. About, probably now it's closer to 70 million cubic feet of that built or manufactured in the United States on a yearly basis. But the one I really get a kick out of is these prefabricated I-joists. You see them at Lowe's, you see them at Menards, you see them all over the place, right? Everybody builds those now. In 2014, there was almost 750 million lineal feet of that made. Now, if I ran the numbers right, that's circling the globe at the equator about 4 to 4.5 times a year. So it's a huge market, and that's actually growing at an exponential rate. That thing is really taking off. The problem with that, though, is it is tied somewhat to the housing industry because most of our new construction has gone away from solid sawn timber to these prefabricated engineered materials. But a real potential area to put some of the products and some of the materials here in the Midwest. Now, this is the one that I think is just the coolest thing in the world. I can talk on this forever. I don't know if many people know this. Oh, let me back up. But all the drones in the Gulf are pushed by Michigan wood. Yes. Somebody just said really. Yeah, they are. I want to tell you that this is a shadow drone. That's an all hard maple laminated propeller blade. The base material for that is made right up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and northern Wisconsin. It's a Michigan company. I'm not sure which manufacturing plant they're actually making it in, but they're all pushed by Michigan wood. Beautiful product, highly engineered, does a great job. Now people ask, why aren't they using high-tech composites? Wood's got some of the most unique characteristics that the military just loves. Outstanding fatigue performance. It outperforms steel, it outperforms the high-tech materials. The other thing it does, and people don't realize this, is it performs at very low temperatures and very high temperatures in a vibration environment better than any material they can manufacture. Classic example of that is most of the material used for pallet stock by the U.S. Department of Defense is still wood. And the reason why is simple. It's got to be able to perform in a vibration environment like in a hot helicopter or aircraft from about 150 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 150 degrees Fahrenheit in one flight. So it's got to be able to go from Kuwait to Alaska and still perform. It can't fail, it can't drop out. The high-tech composites, high temperature, vibration, they basically turn rubbery and fail. Low temperature, they drop them out and they turn very glass-like or brittle and they just collapse. Still, the preferred material is wood. So it's an unbelievable material. So anyway, that's the kind of cool part of it. Now the Predator drone doesn't carry any munitions. We did some work with them on that. It's used a lot. I think the coolest one right now is the Tiger Shark drone. If you type in Tiger Shark drone and do a Google search on it, right now it's at the tip of the spear of every major event going on over in the Gulf. It has about a 65-pound payload. And from what I understand from the Defense Department folks, it carries all the observation equipment. It determines what's going to happen, and then it feeds that information back. That entire little drone is wood, except for the power plant and the wheels. Everything in it's all designed, it's all wood. The propellers are all made from Michigan woods. And ironically, all the design of that came out of the Forest Service's R&D program years and years ago. So it's a great product. Makes you think a little bit about engineering with wood and what we can do with it. This one in the center here I think is really unique too, because people don't think of high-tech racing boats and those very high-end products. That thing was built right up here in Bay City, Michigan by a company called Goujon Brothers. It's laminated Douglas fir veneer, and I think I'll get into why that's a bad thing being here. But those outriggers are all laminated. The epoxy that's used to glue them together is made up of Midland and Dow Chemical. And all the research was done in cooperation with Forest Products, but mostly in Goujon. But they make very, very high-tech applications out of wood. And the reason they do it because wood's very moldable, excellent engineering properties, and outstanding vibration, some of these secondary characteristics. Beautiful product, high-tech company, right here in Michigan. The sad part is they're using Doug fir veneers, and I've talked about that. And the reason they are is not because our woods here couldn't do it in the Midwest. It's because they didn't have the information on it. So we're working with people like Michigan Tech and Michigan State, some of the researchers here. Can we get that fundamental information in their hands so they can make that change to a more local material? High-tech application, great business right here, and they're shipping product all over the world, and those drones are all over, all Michigan. Now, I want to just tell you where we're heading at the laboratory. We're working, and there's a copy of this first version of this maybe on the left, but one of the things we do before we get into any research, and we're going to start embarking on how to use these materials a little bit more, is we do a big literature review and then we publish it. So one of the things we're going to publish here in cooperation with our folks at Michigan Tech is a book on how to use these hardwoods and undervalued materials from the Midwest in some of these engineering applications. We'll have it out next spring. It's a cooperative effort by Michigan Tech, ourselves and the Forest Service. We're going to cover basic things like what are the fundamental properties of some of these materials. What are the manufacturing characteristics? The big thing is here, there'll be chapters on all these engineered products. Trusses, I-joists, laminate veneer lumber, glue lam, timber bridges, CLT, specialty products. We've even have a chapter in there on the cellulosic materials out of forest products in here. So with that, I think I've got to wrap up and we're done. I'll answer any questions. Think about wood just a little bit differently. It's a great material and we've got a great research base going on it. And one other thing, this is my barb on New York. They just won the competition for the tall wood building. So they're now have caught up with Portland, Oregon, and hopefully we'll get some CLT buildings in both of those places. So with that, did it catch us back
Thank
up?
you, Bob. Yep. With that, we're getting close to caught back up. There's some soda and fresh coffee in the back. We're going to take a 6-minute break, reconvene at 3 o'clock with our university panel. So Do it quick, and we're going to be calling you back in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
How was that? Doer? Yeah, very good. Charlie Becker.